You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. Thought is much more than something that you do. It is in fact what you and all the rest of us are as well. Thought constitutes our entire being except for the portion of us that is form, or the packaging that carries around our minds. Try thinking of thought as something that exists not only within you but outside of you as well. This may be difficult because you are accustomed to believing that your thoughts are an internal mechanism that guides the part of you that is form. Try instead to consider thought as a universal that you were born into. It is something that you do as well as something that you are. Once you get used to this new idea, it will become easier and easier for you to view all thought as something that is very much a part of you. Here's a mini lesson in what thought is. Your desire to change your life is, at its core, your thought to change. Your very will to live is born from a thought. Every attitude you hold about your life is a reflection of the thoughts you choose to focus on. Understand this, your past is nothing but a collection of thoughts you've had up until now. And your future, it's simply the thoughts you will choose from this moment forward. Every relationship you have is shaped by how you think about it. Success, it's not something external you chase. It's the thought of success that manifests it into your reality. You can never truly step into someone else's experience because their thoughts are their own. You relate to the world and everyone in it through the lens of your thoughts. It's not what happens out there that defines the quality of your life. It's how you choose to think about what happens. Thinkers from every corner of human wisdom agree. Your mind, your thoughts, are the architects of your destiny. Everything starts with a thought. What you think is what you create. The Dutch philosopher Spinoza said, "I saw that all things I feared, and which feared me, had nothing good or bad in them, save insofar as the mind was affected by them." Albert Ellis, the founder of rational emotive therapy, stated, "People and things do not upset us. Rather, we upset ourselves by believing that they can upset us." We become what we think about all day long, according to Ralph Waldo Emerson. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so, Shakespeare tells us. Abraham Lincoln said, "People are about as happy as they make up their mind to be." Change your thoughts and you change your world, was how Norman Vincent Peale put it. Jesus tells us, "As you think, so shall ye be." Our futures are formed by the thoughts we hold most often. We literally become what we think about, and we are all given the gift of being able to write our own story. For me, this is as close to an absolute truth as anything I know. In my parable Gifts from Aeschylus, Aeschylus says, "There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way." My thoughts have always created my world. After my mother successfully reunited her family, we lived on the east side of Detroit. I spent many nights watching The Tonight Show, starring Steve Allen, on a tiny black and white Admiral television set while everyone else slept. I loved Allen's zaniness. Sitting in that small living room on Moross Road, I would picture myself on The Tonight Show, and in my mind, I would practice talking with Steve Allen. I would actually work on routines, editing this and that out of my conversation as I imagined myself being a guest on the show. But my mind's picture was not me at 13. It was me as an adult who was making an appearance and discussing things I knew to be true. Most of these guest appearances centered around my beliefs, held even then, that we are able to choose our own destiny, able to make others laugh. These thoughts were so real to me that I would tell my brothers and friends what I was going to say on The Tonight Show when I appeared. They considered me a kid with a wild imagination who was always in another world anyway, and so they would humor me and move on to something more realistic. But my internal pictures were never damaged by the attitudes of others. For as long as I can remember, I have been able to enter this world of pure thought, and it is as real for me as the world of form is to all of us. Many times as a young boy, I would know what was going to happen to me before it actually occurred, because I had experienced it in my mind so often. As a youngster, I never did anything with this ability, and eventually I ceased telling others about it. As I shared earlier, after my life-changing experience at my father's grave in 1974, I felt an undeniable shift within me. Something deep inside told me it was time to make significant changes, to step away from the familiar and comfortable life I knew as a university professor and venture into a completely new direction. For nearly a year, I wrestled with the idea of leaving the security of my steady paycheck. But in my mind's eye, I could clearly see it. I saw myself speaking to people all over America about the ideas I had just written in Your Erroneous Zones. The vision was vivid. I knew that the book would be a success. And then, without fully realizing it, one day in my advanced doctoral seminar, I found myself publicly announcing that I would soon be leaving the university to go out on my own. I hadn't even fully processed it with my family, yet here I was, declaring it out loud. What was happening? My external world was simply aligning with the invisible force of my inner vision. The morning came when everything clicked into place. I saw myself standing on my own with no guarantees, no safety net, and yet an overwhelming sense of peace washed over me. I knew this was the day. Within a few hours, I would be stepping fully into my new life, trusting in the picture I had created in my mind and leaving behind the paycheck, the security, the old life, and it felt right. When I arrived on campus, I went immediately to the dean's office. I had not told my wife or family members that this was the day. It was the vision I had had that morning that made it clear for me. The entire process of my entering the dean's office was a mental one. All thoughts, all visions that were private to me, all images of myself that I could no longer erase. I could hardly believe it myself. Here I was, waiting to announce to the dean that I was resigning, effective within a few weeks at the end of the current semester. Our conversation was brief. I said I wanted to go out and do something that I genuinely believed in. She asked me to reconsider and discuss it with my family and some of my colleagues, but I told her that it was already accomplished in my mind, my thoughts, and that I was now simply going through the formality of making it real in the physical world as well. She pointed out all of the risks, how unlikely it was that I would be able to make a living writing and speaking, and that jobs such as the one I held were exceedingly difficult to come by in the 1970s because of a glut of professors and very few openings in the academic world. I told her that I was aware of the risk, and that was one of the big reasons why I was taking this turn in my life. I was headed down the path that Robert Frost called the road less traveled. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. When I left the dean's office, I walked to my own with an inner glow. I was free to advance confidently in the direction of my dreams. As I cleared out my desk and shared the news with my students and doctoral advisees, I drove home with a deep sense of excitement, knowing I was about to take the biggest leap of my life. I was stepping away from a secure, familiar world into the unknown with no media recognition and no guarantees. Yet I was filled with joy because I had already seen this moment so clearly in my mind's eye. I knew it was real before it ever showed up in the physical world. When I discussed this new path with my wife and daughter, they gave me their wholehearted support. I wasn't filled with fear or doubt about the future. Instead, I relied on my history of responsibility and faith that everything would work out. We had savings to lean on, and I was willing to borrow money if needed. Scaling back our expenses was never a fear. It was simply part of the journey if it came to that. What mattered most was that money was never going to stand in the way of following my bliss. My family understood this too, and when people truly love you, they not only encourage you, they share that same inner knowing that everything will work out as it should. They were willing to take the risks with me, trusting that this pursuit of purpose would lead us all to a deeper happiness. Every obstacle that came my way became an opportunity. I was told that there were a minimal number of copies of my book in print, and that even if I did go out and talk to people in the media, it would do no good because most bookstores would not have my book in stock. So I decided to buy up a large quantity of books and take them out to the people myself. I literally became my own distributor initially. I left my books on consignment with store owners across America in 1976, and I had the great fortune to have some wonderful people come into my life at just the right time. One such person, Donna Gould, became such an ardent believer after reading my book that she worked on her own time to help me get bookings all across the country. Donna knew I was paying most of my own expenses, and she contributed many, many hours of her time and tons of her energy to help me. My publisher became more of a believer as he saw the results of my excitement about this project. Before long, I was out in my own car, traveling from small city to smaller city, appearing on talk shows and doing local newspaper interviews. First, I went up and down the East Coast, then to the Midwest, and ultimately on a long cross-country tour with my wife and daughter, paying my own expenses, staying in cheap motels, and most important, enjoying every single minute of this new adventure. I seldom thought about making money. I had published 3 successful textbooks and many professional articles without financial profit. Consequently, I was not motivated now by a desire to make a fortune. I was simply doing something that I loved to do and answering to no one along the way. Since I was using my own savings to finance this trip and to purchase the books, I had total control over every aspect of this promotion. As the months rolled by, my interview schedule increased to as many as 15 a day. Bookstores in cities that I had visited began to reorder from the publisher. At the start, I had been able to get bookings only in the smaller cities, but now the media in larger cities were beginning to book me on their shows. I had been told by an expert in publicity and publishing that the only way to talk to everyone in America in the 1970s was on network television, but that this option was pretty much closed to me because I did not have a national reputation. He suggested I should be happy if I sold a few thousand books in the local New York area, had a couple of printings, and got a publication credit toward a promotion at the university. This was the view of many others who knew the publishing industry inside out. They seemed to me to be unaware of the great truth of Victor Hugo. Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. What is an idea but a thought? The experts had their own ideas and they acted on them. I too had my idea. I agreed that the easiest way to talk with everyone in America was through the network media, but I believed it was not the only way. I could reach everyone in America if I was willing to take the time, spend the energy, and absorb the risks that go with such an approach. I was willing and very eager as well. I would use every barrier as an opportunity to see if I could get past it. And it worked every single time. As much as I was making things happen through my thoughts, I was also letting things happen by not fighting anyone or anything, by doing it all with good cheer and love. It was great fun every single day, every interview, every new city, every new friend, all very exciting. The months became a year, and my family and I were still on the road. Somehow the financial stuff took care of itself, and then one day, while I was appearing on radio station KMOX in St. Louis, I received a call from Arthur Pine, my friend and agent, who informed me that my book would appear on the New York Times national bestseller list the following week, debuting at position number 8. I had accomplished what almost everyone said was impossible. Without one national television or radio appearance, I had been able to go to the people of this country and have enough of those people buy my book to put it on the national bestseller list. I was in awe and in shock. But this was only the beginning of how my internal images, my thoughts, began manifesting. I was becoming informed what I had been thinking about each day. And most important, I was opening myself to allowing my purpose to find me. I had begun clearing myself of the negativity and judgment that had previously interfered with the flow of my process. Other changes started then. I began exercising each day, slowly at first, but very much an everyday thing. In August of 1976, I ran my first mile without stopping. At the end, I was huffing and puffing and in a state of exhaustion, but nevertheless, I finished with a wonderful sense of inner satisfaction. The next day, I made the effort to accomplish this task again, then again on the following day, and within 1 week, I was running a mile comfortably. 2 months later, I ran 8 miles without stopping and thus began my running streak, which continues today, of 8 miles per day, every day without fail since October 7th, 1976. I became more attentive to my eating habits and gradually discontinued many foods which we now recognize as nutritionally unsound. The clearer I became, the less negative and judgmental, the more I began to treat my physical self in healthier ways. As I allowed my purpose to find me, I began to feel happier and more in harmony with myself. Ultimately, it was as if I forgot about myself and tuned in automatically to my strong sense of mission and purpose. This is how the enlightenment process seems to work. One proceeds through a series of phases of first focusing on oneself and consciously working at improving oneself until the inner tumult disappears. As that inner turmoil fades, you find yourself feeling much more purposeful in sharing yourself with others. When you have an inner, authentic sense of love and harmony, that is precisely what you have to give away. As my book began to appear regularly on bestseller lists across America, the demand for me to make personal and media appearances increased dramatically. Shows that previously had turned Donna down cold were now calling to check on my availability. One by one, I started making the circuit stops. And within a few months, the book had catapulted to the top of the list where it was to stay for almost 2 years. Then one day I received the magic phone call that was to lead to the fulfillment of that image I had had as a young boy watching television back on the east side of Detroit. Howard Papoosh of the Tonight Show staff had been handed a copy of my book by someone at a party on Long Island. He took the book with him on his flight back to Los Angeles. The next week, I received a call from a staff person for The Tonight Show asking me if, when I was next in Los Angeles, I would be willing to come into the Burbank studios for a pre-interview for the show. Within just 10 days, I found myself sitting in Howard's office, sharing the ideas I believed in with absolute conviction. By this point, I had done hundreds of interviews, and I had learned that the most effective strategy was simply to show up as my authentic self, just me, having a conversation as if we were sitting together in my living room. Howard and I connected instantly, and to this day we remain close friends. A week later, I was set to make my very first appearance on The Tonight Show. Shecky Greene, the well-known Las Vegas comedian, was guest hosting that evening. As I stood outside the green room before the show, I noticed a row of payphones. In the moment, I decided to call my wife and share my excitement. While on the phone, I glanced to my side and saw someone using the phone next to me. It was Steve Allen, the very man I had imagined meeting so many times in my mind nearly 25 years earlier. The synchronicity of the moment wasn't lost on me. It felt like a manifestation of what I had been envisioning for so long. The taping that evening felt incredible. I had almost 15 minutes on national television to share the ideas that meant so much to me. It was a dream come true. But as I arrived at the airport to catch an overnight flight back to the East Coast, I heard my name being paged over the loudspeaker. Howard was on the line with disappointing news. The show had been preempted due to an overrun at the Republican National Convention, and my appearance wouldn't air until some undetermined future date. Flying home, I wondered if the show would ever be aired, but the very next day, Howard called again with a new opportunity. He asked me to return to Los Angeles the next day for an appearance with Johnny Carson that would air later that week. So I made another cross-country trip and taped the show with Johnny on a Wednesday night. Although we only had 6 or 7 minutes for the interview, Johnny asked me on air if I could stay over and reappear on Friday evening. And just like that, what started as a setback turned into something even greater than I had imagined. I stayed over 2 days and did the show that Friday evening, and it went beautifully. A week from the next Monday, the preempted show aired. So I had gone from an unknown person who was able to get himself booked only on local shows to one with 3 Tonight Show appearances on national television, all airing within an 11-day period. It seemed clear to me that Thoreau was absolutely right when he wrote, "If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours." Your Erroneous Zones was eventually published in 26 languages around the world. Other books have followed, as have tapes, articles, international travel for professional speaking engagements, and an opportunity for me to make a difference in the lives of millions and millions of people. I received more money in the first year I was out on my own without the security of a regular paycheck than I had in the entire 36 years of my life before then.